Why was her rifle trembling, even though her hands were steady? The radio crackled with desperate voices, a harsh reminder that this was not another training ground, not another simulation where mistakes could be corrected with a laugh later. "This is SEAL Team Charlie," the voice hissed, strained and clipped between bursts of gunfire. "We're pinned down, taking heavy fire from all sides, requesting immediate backup." Static, a pause. Then the reply came back, cold, bureaucratic, final. "Negative, Charlie. No assets available. You're on your own." Her jaw clenched. She shifted her cheek against the worn rifle stock, eyes narrowing against the glass of her scope. She could see the chaos below. Men crouched behind jagged rocks, return fire wild and desperate, muzzle flashes splitting the valley into a strobe of violence. It wasn't her mission. It wasn't supposed to be her fight. But as the echoes rolled through the Carpathian Mountains, Angela Foster knew she could not stay silent. Angela had lived her entire life walking the line between shadow and light. Once she had been Army, a decorated sniper, with tour in deserts and mountains that had left sand still lodged in the creases of her soul. She'd left that life behind after the war took more from her than she was willing to admit. A husband, a brother, even a version of herself she no longer recognized. She'd sworn off uniforms, medals, the hollow salutes that meant nothing when folded flags were handed to mothers. Yet here she was, prone on a cold ledge, heart pounding, rifle aligned, watching a dozen Americans about to be erased in a forgotten corner of the world. Forgotten, except by her. A round snapped against stone inches from her, ricocheting into the void. The enemy had not seen her yet, but they were searching. She forced her breathing to steady. Inhale, pause, exhale, a ritual older than her grief. Through the scope she saw the enemy lines tightening. Not rabble, not militia. These were professionals moving with practiced rhythm, advancing in layers, firing in suppressive arcs. Whoever had sent the SEALs here had underestimated the truth. This valley wasn't wilderness. It was a kill box, and the walls were closing in. Angela adjusted her scope 2 clicks, found the glint of a machine gun nest high on the ridge. 50 rounds a minute spitting down on the pinned SEALs. She didn't think. She squeezed. The crack echoed across the valley. The gunner's body slumped, weapon silent. Below, a pause in the chaos. A voice broke through radio static, startled. What the hell was that sound? She didn't answer, not yet. Another hostile shifted position, climbing toward better cover. Another shot, clean and final. Silence where chaos had been. In the ravine, Lieutenant Commander Ryan Blake pressed his back against stone, scanning the cliff faces. His voice was raw. "Anyone have eyes on friendlies? Report." Negative replies all around. Confusion. A sudden fragile hope. Angela's finger hovered over her comm switch. She hesitated. She hadn't touched a military frequency in years. She told herself she was done. She buried that uniform for good. But as she watched those men fight for every second of their lives, she knew the truth. She wasn't done at all. The radio on her harness hissed. She pressed the transmit button. Her voice, calm and precise, filled their net. "SEAL Team Charlie, this is Ghost 6. Maintain your positions. Let me work." A beat of stunned silence followed. Then Blake's voice, demanding, desperate for clarity. "Ghost 6, identify yourself immediately. What's your unit designation?" Her lips tightened. No official unit, just someone who doesn't enjoy watching Americans die in a box canyon. Her rifle spoke again, and another hostile vanished into the dirt. For a moment she felt it, the familiar rhythm, the calm that came only when the world shrank to a scope and a trigger. But beneath it was the ache. The same ache that had followed her since she left the service. She had promised herself never again. Never to feel the recoil as anything but a memory. Never to stand guard over men who might not make it home. And yet, here she was. "Whoever you are," Blake's voice cut in again, sharper now, "you've got our attention, you want to help. Then talk me through it. Where are they moving?" Angela exhaled, adjusted her scope. 44 left, flanking maneuver southwest. Move 4 men now or you'll be overrun. There was no hesitation in his reply. Orders barked, men shifted, and just like that her voice became part of their fight. It should have terrified her, re-entering this life she thought she had abandoned. Instead, something strange stirred in her chest, something between pride and fear. She was back in the war, a ghost unseen, yet holding lives on the edge of her trigger finger. But she knew the cost. Every shot carried weight. Every kill added to the ledger she could never balance. She remembered her husband's words before his last deployment. "How many more do we have to take before it takes us, Ange?" He never came back, and she never answered. Her finger tightened again. Another hostile dropped. The SEALs below were fighting with renewed strength now, their desperation tempered by the knowledge they weren't alone. They didn't know her name, didn't know the scars that drove her here. All they knew was that a ghost in the cliffs had decided they mattered. But as the minutes stretched into eternity, Angela's old wounds bled quietly beneath her calm. She wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't supposed to care. And yet, with each life she saved, she felt both the weight of her past and the possibility of something else, something she didn't dare name. The night deepened. The valley echoed with rifle cracks, shouts, and the unyielding rhythm of survival. Angela remained unseen, her presence a question none of them could answer. And she knew sooner or later, one of them would ask what she hadn't told them. Not yet. What if the truth about her was more dangerous than the enemies below? Angela didn't move. Not even as tracer fire slashed the sky, not even as enemy shouts in foreign tongues echoed through the valley. Her body was still, her rifle an extension of her breathing. But inside, every nerve trembled with an unease she hadn't felt in years. This wasn't supposed to happen. She had come to the Carpathians for silence, for distance, for the kind of isolation that numbed old wounds. She wasn't here to fight someone else's war again. Yet now, her voice was in their radios, her bullets tearing through enemies that had never even seen her face. Through her scope she tracked movement. A squad shifting south, shadows darting between broken limestone and scrub. Not militia, no sloppy errors. This was military precision rehearsed. They had studied this terrain, prepared this ambush. The SEALs had walked into a trap designed to bury them in an unmarked grave. Angela adjusted her position. Rock bit into her ribs, she ignored it. Pain was an old companion. She squeezed, another hostile dropped. The rest scattered, their formation broken. "Ghost 6, Blake's voice came low, almost steady, but beneath it she could hear the strain of a man who knew the clock was running out. "We need status. How many left?" She counted quickly, scanning, calculating. 38 give or take. They're regrouping. East Ridge is shifting fire toward your medic. Move him now. Blake didn't hesitate. His voice snapped across the net. Orders carried weight when they came from a man unwilling to let panic dictate the outcome. Angela respected that. She had seen leaders falter in less desperate circumstances. And yet, as she covered his men, something inside her twisted. She wasn't one of them, not anymore. She wasn't supposed to care about their discipline, their courage, but she did. She couldn't stop herself. Another shot, another hostile erased. She breathed, slow and steady, but her mind was far from calm. Memories rose like ghosts she hadn't invited. Her husband's laugh, her brother's steady hand the first time he taught her how to line up iron sights on an old hunting rifle, the folded flags that replaced them both, the quiet rage when she realized no medal, no commendation, no speech from a commander could fill the absence. Angela blinked hard, forcing the memories back into the shadows. Focus. She was not that woman anymore. She was here, now, saving lives that had nothing to do with her past. Below, one of the SEALs shouted, "Reloading." The words were almost drowned by the roar of automatic fire. Angela's finger tightened again. She dropped the enemy closing in on him before he could even chamber the next round. Her breath caught. That was too close, too personal. and she realized with sudden clarity if she slipped, if she missed just once, 12 men would die. Why am I doing this? The thought burned in her chest. She wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't supposed to feel the old rhythm again, the sharp clarity of combat that stripped everything else away. But the truth came anyway, quiet and undeniable, because she couldn't stand by. Not again, not when she could stop it. Ghost 6, Blake's voice broke through her thoughts. I don't know who you are, but your timing is, hell, it's saving us. You've got my men's respect already, but I need to know, can you keep this up? Angela hesitated. She almost laughed, bitter and soft. Could she keep this up? She had kept it up through deserts and cities, through nights where the only sound was her own rifle and the echo of her conscience. She had kept it up until it broke her, until she swore never again. Yes, she said finally, her voice clipped, certain. I'll keep you alive. And yet the promise tightened around her chest like a noose. The battle raged. She moved like a shadow on the ridge, shifting angles, adjusting for wind that whipped down the valley. Each shot was a decision. Each pull of the trigger carried weight. And through it all, the SEALs below fought with the desperation of men refusing to die quietly. But Angela could see the truth the moment it formed. The enemy wasn't finished. They were regrouping for something bigger. Her scope caught the flicker of light near a cave mouth in the western cliffs. Movements organized, disciplined. Charlie actual, she said quickly into the net. They're consolidating on the west side. Looks like they're digging in. If they lock that down, they'll control your exit route. Blake's answer was immediate. Can you stop them? Angela's lips pressed into a thin line. Could she? She watched shadows vanish into the cave, setting up interlocking fire zones, a nightmare waiting to happen. She exhaled, her fingers squeezed. The shot ricocheted off limestone, disappeared into the darkness of the cave, and a man screamed before silence swallowed him. She worked quickly, bouncing rounds off stone, making the impossible look rehearsed. One by one, the positions inside the cave collapsed. When the last echo faded, she lowered her rifle, chest heaving. She hated herself a little in that moment because it felt good, too good. The precision, the control, the way death bent to her calculations. It was the part of her she had buried, the part she had sworn to silence. And here it was, alive again. Jesus Christ, one of the SEALs whispered over the net, his awe unguarded. Whoever she is, she doesn't miss. Angela closed her eyes. His words should have been pride. Instead, they were chains, because she knew what it cost to never miss. Minutes bled into hours. The valley became a graveyard of shadows and muzzle flashes. The SEALs grew quieter on the net, their voices raw, their ammo low. Angela felt every beat of their exhaustion as if it were her own. She could hear it in Blake's voice when he finally asked, softer this time, Ghost 6, are you military? The question hung in the static. She could have lied, could have given him nothing, but something in his tone, the same weight she carried, forced her answer. I was. A pause, then steady as stone she added, not anymore. Blake didn't press, he just said, well, tonight you are. The words cut deeper than the recoil of any rifle, because they dragged her back into a world she had promised to leave. Her scope caught sudden movement again. The enemy had shifted their tactics. Desperation now. They were massing, forming a line, readying for a final charge. Angela's stomach turned cold. They weren't going to retreat. They were going to try to bury the SEALs in one suicidal rush. Charlie actual, she warned. They're coming, full frontal assault, everything they have left. Blake swore low. His men scrambled, checking magazines that were nearly empty. She could hear the reality in their breaths, in the way silence stretched too long before someone whispered, we're almost dry. Angela checked her own rifle. Ammunition remained, but not infinite. She couldn't cover every angle, not this time. And in that moment the truth hit her, she wasn't enough, not alone. For the first time that night, fear clawed up her throat, not for herself but for them, for the 12 men below whose lives had been tied to her trigger. And underneath the fear, something else, something older. The memory of her brother's voice the night before his last deployment. Promise me, Ange. If you ever walk away, walk all the way. Don't half live in the shadows. She hadn't kept that promise. And now, here she was, half in, half out, a ghost caught between the war she had abandoned and the one she couldn't stop fighting. The enemy began to move. The charge was seconds away. Angela's heart pounded as she pressed her cheek into the stock. If I can't save them all, then what was the point of coming back at all? The first wave surged forward, and Angela squeezed the trigger. What do you do when the line between survival and sacrifice is only one breath wide? The valley erupted. Muzzle flashes burst like lightning against stone, enemy voices shouting in furious unison as the charge began. Shadows surged forward, reckless and determined, carrying the kind of desperation that didn't fear death. Angela pressed herself harder into the rock, cheek welded to the stock, scope aligned. Her fingers squeezed, one hostile down, then another. But it was a tide, not a trickle, and tides didn't stop for one stone in the water. Below, the SEALs opened fire, controlled bursts, every round precious. They dropped the first wave, but the second came on harder, stepping over the fallen, firing wildly as they ran. Tracers cut through the smoke. Stones splintered. A scream cracked the radio. Angela shifted her aim, covered the wounded man before another round could find him. She didn't think, she didn't feel. She simply acted. Years of training, years of scars guiding every motion. But inside she was breaking. Because this wasn't just another mission. This wasn't supposed to be her mission at all. She had promised herself when she left the army that she would never again bear the weight of other people's lives on her scope. And now here she was, back in the fight, every trigger pull carving away at the vow she had sworn on the graves of the people she'd lost. Blake's voice shouted over the net, hold the line." She could hear the strain, the raw edge of a commander facing impossible odds. She admired him for it, because she remembered what it was to carry men with nothing left but faith in your voice. Another hostile dropped, another. She was fast, precise, but the wave kept coming. Her throat tightened. I can't stop them all, not this time. And that was when she realized the truth. She wasn't fighting for herself. She wasn't even fighting for the flag she had long ago stopped saluting. She was fighting because she couldn't let 12 men die the way her brother had, surrounded, outnumbered, abandoned by command. She shifted again, heart pounding, muscles screaming from the strain of holding the prone position for hours. A hostile broke through the smoke, closer than the rest. Her scope caught him, eyes wide, mouth open in a battle cry, before she ended him mid-stride. But there were more, too many. Her comms crackled, a voice Blake's harsh with urgency. "Ghost 6, we're dry, half my men are out." The words slammed into her chest. Dry. They had nothing left but their knives, their fists, their will. She could hear it in the silence that followed, the sharp breaths of men bracing for the end. Angela's heart hammered. This is it. This is where they break, where I lose them just like I lost. No, not again. She forced herself to breathe, slow, calm. She reached into the silence inside her, the place she had sworn never to touch again. And then her voice cut through the net, sharp, commanding, leaving no room for argument. Charlie team dropped flat now. Blake didn't hesitate. He gave the order. Every man hit the dirt. Angela's rifle cracked again and again, her shots threading the impossible spaces between prone Americans and charging hostiles. Each round was surgical, each kill exact. It was as though the world narrowed to a tunnel, time stretching, her body no longer her own. Just precision, just inevitability. One by one the attackers fell, stumbled, collapsed into silence. The charge slowed, broke apart, dissolved into chaos. And then suddenly the valley went quiet. Angela's breath came in ragged pulls. Smoke drifted. Bodies lay scattered like broken chess pieces across the floor of the ravine. The SEALs didn't move at first. stunned by the silence that followed so much violence. Blake's voice finally broke through, low and rough. "Charlie Actual, sound off." One by one, voices answered. Wounded, exhausted, but alive. All 12. Angela closed her eyes. Relief hit her like recoil, sharp and heavy. She had done it. She had saved them. But the victory felt hollow because she knew what it had cost. Her hands trembled now after the shooting stopped. Not from fear, from the weight of it. The weight of being pulled back into the war she thought she had left forever. "Ghost 6, Blake said into the net. "Status." Angela didn't answer at first. She pulled her cheek away from the stock, exhaled slowly. She wanted to disappear, to fade back into silence before they asked the questions she couldn't answer. But the comms hissed again. "Ghost 6, talk to me." She pressed the transmit, her voice quieter now. "Operational status secure." A pause, then Blake, softer, almost human now. "You saved us. I don't know who you are, but you saved us." Angela said nothing, because she hadn't saved herself, not yet. She shifted back from her firing position, muscles aching. She slid the bolt open, checked her remaining rounds, enough to fight again if she had to. And part of her hated that she wasn't sure if she wanted the fight to be over. Because in those hours of chaos she had felt alive again, not the numb, half-buried life she had built since leaving the service, not the quiet cabin, the empty nights, alive, the way only war could make her feel, and that terrified her more than the bullets. Down below, Blake and his men began to move, tending wounds, scavenging ammo from the fallen. She watched them through her scope, saw the way they leaned on each other, their bond forged not in metals but in the simple, stubborn refusal to let each other die. A pang of envy twisted in her chest. Once she had belonged to a unit like that. Once she had trusted people with her life. And then the war had taken them away, one by one, until all she had left were ghosts. Her radio hissed again. "Ghost 6, you still with us?" She almost turned it off, almost cut the cord, walked away before they asked her to step out of the shadows. But instead, her finger hovered over the switch. And she realized something. She didn't want to be a ghost forever. "Not yet." "Still with you," she said, voice steady again. "But you need to move. Reinforcements won't be far." Blake didn't argue. Orders crackled across the net. The SEALs shifted, moving with the practiced efficiency of men who knew they had minutes before the next storm. Angela watched them go. She stayed behind on the ridge, her rifle still in her hands, her body aching but unwilling to stand. Because she knew, sooner or later, they would ask who she really was. And she didn't have an answer, not one she was ready to speak. The valley lay quiet now, littered with silence and smoke. And for the first time in years, Angela Foster whispered into the cold air what she hadn't dared admit. "I'm still here." What happens when the silence after battle feels louder than the gunfire itself? The valley was quiet now, too quiet. Smoke curled upward from the blackened limestone. The stench of cordite, blood, and dirt hung heavy in the cold night air. Angela lay flat on her ledge, cheek pressed against the stock, scope sweeping over still bodies and fractured stone. Nothing moved, not yet. Her pulse slowed, though her hands still trembled faintly. She could hear her own breathing inside her headset, the faint static of comms that had gone silent after Blake's last order. Somewhere below, his men were regrouping, patching wounds, scavenging what little ammunition the dead had left behind. But Angela didn't move, because she knew what came next. Silence was never safe. Silence was the pause before something worse. Her scope caught the faintest flicker near the northern exit of the valley. Not firelight, headlamps. Dim, deliberate reinforcements. She felt her stomach tighten. Whoever they had just fought was not operating alone. That kind of ambush wasn't built by 50 men. There would be more. There were always more. She pressed her comm switch, her voice steady though her chest ached. "Charlie Actual, this is Ghost 6. You've got movement north. They'll be on you within minutes. You can't stay here." Blake's voice came back, clipped but calm, the kind of voice that made men trust him even when death was a breath away. "Copy that, we're moving." Angela adjusted her scope again. She could see them now, figures filtering into the valley mouth. Organized, disciplined, not militia, soldiers, professional. She counted quickly. 20. No, 30, maybe more. The SEALs couldn't take another fight like the last one. Not with their ammo gone, not with their bodies battered. She swallowed. This was where she should let go, fade back into the shadows, let them fight their way out alone. That was her promise to herself. Stay out, stay gone, don't get dragged back into a war that had already cost her everything. But her eyes stayed locked to the scope, and her finger found the trigger again. She squeezed, one down, then another. The new wave faltered, confused. Shouts echoed through the canyon, men dropping low, searching the cliffs. Angela shifted, fired again, moved before they could triangulate. Below, Blake's voice barked commands. The SEALs fell back in formation, wounded slung over shoulders, their path cutting toward the southern ridge. They were moving, but without her cover they wouldn't get far. Angela's heart pounded. She was in it again, deep. No way out now but through. "Go 6, Blake's voice came through the net, tight with urgency. "Whoever you are, stay with us. We'll cover the retreat, but we need your eyes." She hesitated for a fraction of a second. The part of her that had sworn never again screamed at her to cut comms, to disappear. But another part, the part that had just saved 12 men, spoke louder. "I'm with you," she said. And once the words were out, there was no taking them back. The valley became a maze of shadows and shifting fire. Angela moved along the ridge, low and quick, firing between rocks, covering their retreat. Each shot was measured, deliberate, thinning the reinforcements before they could fully press the assault. She felt her old instincts awaken, angles, distances, the way wind curved bullets across space. She was no longer just surviving. She was operating. She was back. And it scared her. Because buried beneath the focus was the same ache she had carried since the day she left the army. The ache of belonging too much to a war that never gave anything back. The ache of knowing that no matter how many lives she saved tonight, she would never balance the scales of the lives she had already lost. Her brother's last smile haunted her. Her husband's last letter, folded and worn, tucked in a box she never opened anymore. She blinked hard, forcing the ghosts away. Focus, now. Another enemy dropped, another line broken. The SEALs reached the southern ridgeline, slipping into cover, still alive. Angela exhaled shakily. Relief was short-lived, because as the SEALs regrouped, her comms crackled again. Blake's voice was softer this time, deliberate. "Go 6, you've saved us twice now. I need to know, are you military?" Her chest tightened. She wanted to lie, wanted to say she was no one, nothing, just a shadow in the mountains, but her silence would betray her. Finally she answered, quiet, flat, "I was." A pause, then Blake again, his voice carrying weight. "Not anymore." Angela's throat closed. She stared at the scope, at the bodies littering the valley floor. Memories clawed at her, the folded flags, the silence of empty houses. "Not anymore," she whispered. Blake didn't push. He just said with something like respect, "Well, you are tonight." The words hit harder than any bullet, because they forced her to face the truth she had tried so hard to bury. She was back. She was in this fight, and part of her didn't want to let go. The SEALs began moving again, climbing toward higher ground, their silhouettes ragged in the moonlight. Angela followed parallel along the ridge, her rifle steady, her breath burning in her chest. But as she moved, something shifted inside her. For years she had lived like a ghost, half here, half gone, surviving but never living. Tonight, for the first time, she felt alive, terrifyingly alive. And that terrified her more than anything. Because she knew the war didn't give life freely. It always took something in return. As dawn began to bleed faint light into the sky, the seals disappeared into the southern rocks, their shapes swallowed by distance. Angela lingered behind, scope sweeping one last time over the valley. Bodies silent smoke. And then she saw it: movement, not enemy, not seal. On the far ridge across the valley a single figure stood, tall, still, watching. For a heartbeat, Angela thought it might be her reflection, a ghost staring back at her from another life. She lifted her scope, focused, but by the time the glass found the ridge, the figure was gone. Her chest tightened, a phantom or just another shadow. The radio hissed softly, Blake's voice again. "Ghost 6, are you still with us?" Angela pressed her transmit. Her voice was low, steady. "I'm here." But what she didn't say, what she couldn't say, was the truth that echoed in her chest. For how long? Because every step back into this fight dragged her closer to the part of herself she had sworn to bury. The part that loved the war. The part that belonged here. And she wasn't sure if she could ever leave again. What do you say when the morning light reveals more questions than answers? Angela hadn't slept. She couldn't. Dawn crept slowly over the Carpathian ridgelines, staining the sky in bruised hues of violet and red. The silence of the valley below felt heavy, unnatural, as if the mountains themselves were holding their breath. She sat cross-legged now, rifle across her knees, the cold stone leaching warmth from her body. For hours she had remained on watch, scanning, listening, waiting. Every sound was magnified: the rustle of wind in pine branches, the distant crack of ice fracturing on the river, the metallic echo of her own slow breathing inside the comms headset. The seals had withdrawn before first light. She could still picture them, 12 battered silhouettes slipping south through the rocks, carrying their wounded, moving with the bone-deep exhaustion of men who had fought too long, too hard, with too little left. But she had not gone with them. She told herself it was safer this way, safer for them, safer for her. She had played her role, the unseen hand that tipped the scales, and now she could vanish again, back to silence, back to being no one. Yet the thought hollowed her out, because she wasn't sure she wanted to vanish anymore. Her comms hissed softly, startling her. She had expected silence. Instead, Blake's voice came through, low and steady. "Ghost 6, do you copy?" Angela's hand hesitated over the transmit. Part of her wanted to cut the line, walk away before the questions began. But another part, stronger, undeniable, pressed the button. "Copy." There was a pause, and then Blake spoke again. "We're secure for now. Temporary cover South Ridge. Casualties stable." He exhaled, the kind of exhale you only heard from a man holding too much for too long. "We're alive because of you." Angela's throat tightened. She wanted to tell him not to say that she hadn't saved them for gratitude, that she had done it because she couldn't let herself watch another slaughter, but the words caught in her chest. Instead, she said quietly, "Don't thank me, just move fast. Reinforcements will come back harder." Blake didn't argue, but before he cut transmission, his voice softened. "You're not alone out here, not anymore." The words lingered long after the static died. "Alone, not anymore." Angela's fingers tightened on the rifle stock. She had lived in solitude for years, building her life on silence and distance. But a single night had shattered that. Now she wasn't sure she could go back to the quiet, not when the echoes of men calling her Ghost 6 still clung to her ears. She stood finally, stretching stiff muscles, her gaze drawn once more to the northern ridge. That was where she had seen it, the figure standing, watching, vanishing before her scope could settle. It hadn't been imagination. She knew the difference between tricks of light and the weight of presence. Someone else was here, someone who had chosen not to act. Her gut twisted, friend, enemy, or something in between. The mountains gave no answer. She moved quickly, breaking down her firing position, shouldering her pack. The SEALs were heading south. Reinforcements had come from the north. If she wanted to keep her advantage, she needed elevation. distance. But as she hiked higher, weaving through narrow goat paths and scree slopes, her thoughts betrayed her. Blake's voice, the way his men had trusted her orders without hesitation, the way they had lived because she had chosen not to walk away. For years she had told herself she was done with that world, that she had given enough, that her scars had earned her the right to disappear. But standing over the valley, with dawn breaking and 12 men breathing because of her, Angela felt a dangerous flicker of something she thought she'd buried forever. Belonging. She hated herself for it. By mid-morning, she reached a narrow plateau that overlooked both the southern ridge and the northern pass. The valley stretched below, scarred with the black smears of battle. From here, she could see the aftermath more clearly. Bodies scattered in unnatural positions, weapons left where they had fallen. The silence was absolute. She lay prone again, scope scanning slowly. No immediate movement, but she knew the quiet was temporary. Whoever had trained and equipped the enemy force wasn't finished, not with an ambush of that scale failing. Her eyes drifted, almost unwillingly, to the south. She couldn't see the seals anymore, but she pictured them moving, climbing, finding temporary safety. She wondered if they still spoke of her in low voices, if they wondered who the ghost was that had turned the impossible into survival. The thought both warmed and unsettled her. She had lived as a ghost for so long. Was it possible to step back into being flesh and blood, to matter again, not just in whispers but in daylight? Her scope caught movement at the edge of the battlefield. She adjusted, breath tightening. Two figures, moving carefully among the bodies. Not soldiers, not locals, observers. Their posture was wrong for combatants, upright, deliberate, scanning with something more than weapons. One lifted binoculars. The other carried a pack bristling with antennae. Angela's stomach dropped. Intelligence, not reinforcements, collection teams. Whoever they were working for wanted to study what had happened here. Her rifle shifted almost of its own will, scope centering on the man with the binoculars. One squeeze and the problem would vanish. Clean, simple. But her finger froze. Because this wasn't just about tactics anymore. This was about the question that had haunted her since the first shot last night. What am I becoming again? If she fired, she was back, fully. A soldier in the shadows, a ghost bound to a war she had sworn off. If she didn't, she would watch knowledge spread, her existence whispered into channels she had no control over. Her breath stilled, her hands trembled. And then, for the first time in years, she lowered the rifle without firing. The two figures lingered for several minutes, scanning, taking notes, then disappeared into the northern rocks. Angela exhaled slowly. Relief and regret twisted together. She had chosen restraint, but restraint didn't erase the truth. Someone else knew. Her comms hissed again. Blake's voice, quieter this time, almost like he knew she was listening too closely. Ghost 6, we've set temporary camp. 2 men down with wounds but stable. I need to ask you something. Angela's throat tightened. She knew what was coming. Why are you here? The question cracked something inside her. She stared at the scope, at the empty valley below, and felt her chest tighten around the words she had never spoken aloud. Why was she here? Because she couldn't let go of the war that had already taken everything from her. Because disappearing hadn't made the ghosts leave. Because silence was worse than the sound of gunfire. But she didn't say any of that. Instead, her voice came soft, almost breaking. Because sometimes you can't walk away. There was a pause. Then Blake spoke again, his voice steady but heavy with understanding. Then I guess we've got more in common than I thought. The comms went silent again. Angela lowered her head to the stone, eyes closing. The sun was higher now, warming the rock beneath her, but it didn't touch the cold ache inside her chest. For the first time in years, she admitted the truth to herself. She was back, whether she wanted to be or not. And somewhere on the northern ridge, someone else had seen it happen. What if the shadows you feared weren't just outside, but inside you? Angela didn't move for a long time after the observers vanished into the northern rocks. She stayed prone on the ledge, cheek pressed against cold limestone, rifle laid flat beside her. The morning sun crept higher, burning mist from the valley, exposing every scar the night had carved into stone. She had lowered her weapon, chosen not to take the shot, and yet the decision didn't feel like mercy. It felt like hesitation. Her hands flexed unconsciously against the stock. Once, hesitation like that would have been unthinkable. Once, she was the soldier others trusted to never waver, to always know when to squeeze, when not to. She had built her reputation on being decisive when others froze. But now she was a ghost second-guessing herself, lost between the person she had been and the person she pretended to be. Her comms buzzed softly, Blake's voice lower, heavier than before. Ghost 6, sitrep. Angela swallowed hard, forcing her voice steady. Elevated, observing, you've got eyes on you, North Ridge, 2 men, recon or intel, not shooters. There was silence on the line for a long time. Then Blake said, copy, so we're not alone. His words carried more than tactical weight. He knew she wasn't alone either. Angela broke down her firing position and moved higher into the rocks, every step deliberate, careful. The mountain paths demanded attention. Loose gravel, jagged stone, switchbacks that offered no forgiveness if she slipped. But her mind stayed fixed on the question that wouldn't leave her. Why hadn't she taken the shot? It should have been simple. 2 enemy operatives meant danger. Eliminate them. Protect the SEALs. Protect herself. But when she'd had them in her scope, she had frozen. Because for 1 second she hadn't wanted to be the person who always pulled the trigger. And yet wasn't that who she was, who she had always been? By midday she reached another high outcropping overlooking the southern ridge. Through her scope she found the SEALs again. Their camp was small, camouflaged beneath overhanging rock. 2 men moved slowly, bandaged but alive. Others kept watch in tight rotations. Blake sat slightly apart, radio in hand, his posture carved in fatigue and resolve. Angela lingered on him longer than she intended. She recognized the weight in his shoulders, the isolation of command, the unspoken fear of losing men under your care. She had carried that same burden once, and it had nearly destroyed her. Her chest tightened. She almost envied him because he still belonged to something. She tore her gaze away. Belonging was dangerous. It was what she'd lost once before and what she couldn't afford to lose again. The mountains shifted with afternoon heat, snowmelt running in rivulets down stone, carrying the faint echoes of distant voices. Angela adjusted her scope. The observers had returned. Different angle this time, higher ground, looking down at the SEALs' position. Her pulse quickened. They were tracking them, reporting, setting the stage for something larger. Her comms hissed, Blake's voice again, this time taut with unease. Ghost 6, you seeing what I'm seeing? Yes. What are they waiting for? Angela didn't answer, because she knew the truth. They weren't waiting. They were watching, recording, gathering patterns, positions, weaknesses. And if there were 2, there would be more. The SEALs didn't have the strength to fight another wave. Not now. Angela knew it. Blake knew it. And whoever sat on that ridge knew it too. For the first time since she had broken radio silence, Angela felt fear. Not of bullets, not of dying, but of what came next. Because this wasn't just survival anymore. This was something larger, something planned. Her hand hovered over the transmit. Finally, she spoke. They're not here to fight, they're here to measure, which means reinforcements, heavy ones. Blake's reply came low, edged with the same grim understanding. Then we move, tonight. Angela adjusted her scope one last time, tracking the observers until they faded back into the rock. Her gut twisted. She had seen this before, in cities where insurgents filmed every American patrol, in valleys where movements were cataloged until the trap closed. Intelligence wasn't random. It was preparation. She pulled back from the scope, sitting with her back against cold stone, head tilted to the sky. Clouds drifted, thin and pale. She wondered if her brother had ever felt this way before his last mission, the sense that the enemy wasn't just fighting but waiting, watching. Her hand brushed unconsciously against the scar that ran along her ribcage, hidden beneath layers of fabric. She had earned it in a firefight years ago, the same one that had taken her husband. She had promised herself then, no more. No more wars that ended in folded flags. And yet here she was in another valley, guarding another dozen men she barely knew. And the worst part, she wasn't sure if she was protecting them, or if she was protecting herself from disappearing completely. As night fell, the mountains shifted again. Shadows lengthened, wind howled through narrow gaps, carrying whispers of movement. Angela repositioned higher, her rifle angled toward the North Pass. Through her scope, faint green flares lit the horizon, markers, signals. Her stomach clenched, reinforcements moving under cover of night. She pressed her transmit. Charlie Actual, you've got incoming, multiple squads, 20 maybe 30, North Pass, they'll hit you before dawn. Blake didn't waste time. Copy, we'll move now. Angela tracked them as the SEALs broke camp, their silhouettes blending into the rocks. She shadowed them from above, covering their movement with her scope, every nerve tuned to the possibility of muzzle flash in the dark. But the attack didn't come. Not yet. The enemy was patient, coordinated. They wanted the SEALs to run, to tire, to break. Angela's teeth clenched. She had seen this tactic before. Push them until there's nowhere left to go, until exhaustion does the killing for you. Her comms hissed softly, Blake's voice ragged now with fatigue. Ghost 6, tell me you've seen this before. Tell me you know how to stop it. Angela closed her eyes briefly. She wanted to lie, wanted to tell him she had all the answers, but the truth weighed too heavy. I've seen it, she admitted, and it doesn't end clean. There was silence. Then Blake's voice, quieter now, almost human beneath the commander's steel. Then why are you still here? The question cut deeper than any wound. Why was she still here? Because she couldn't leave. Because she needed them alive to silence the ghosts inside her. Because walking away would mean admitting she was already gone. Her voice came low, almost breaking. Because if I walk away, you die. The radio went silent, but in that silence something passed between them, not trust, not yet, but recognition. As the SEALs slipped further south, Angela lingered on the ridge, her scope scanning the horizon. She caught the faintest movement again, higher, farther. A third observer this time, not north, not south, west. They were surrounded. Angela's heart thudded. She whispered into the cold night, words not meant for comms, not meant for anyone but herself. They're closing the net. And in her chest, a truth she could no longer deny. She wasn't just fighting for 12 men anymore. She was fighting for the last pieces of herself she hadn't already buried. What do you do when the trap closes, and there's nowhere left to run? The mountain air was knife-sharp as Angela pressed her body into the granite. Night bled across the sky, swallowing the last traces of light. The SEALs moved below her, shadows slipping through narrow ravines, their pace quick but strained. She tracked them through her scope, every movement careful, every breath slow. But her eyes kept drifting higher, north, west, east. The watchers hadn't vanished. They were circling. Patience was their weapon. They were building the net tighter, step by step, until escape was no longer an option. Angela's gut twisted. She had seen this before, in Afghan valleys, in Balkan ruins, in deserts where the sand itself seemed to conspire. The enemy didn't need to win in one strike. They only needed to choke the life slowly, exhaust, bleed, corner. Her comms buzzed, Blake's voice ragged. Ghost 6, we've spotted movement west, you seeing it too? She swept her scope, found what he had. Shadows flitting between rocks, 2 squads at least, cutting them off. Yes, she said quietly, They're pushing you south, hurting. A silence stretched. Blake understood. He always did. Then we're running straight into it. Angela closed her eyes for a moment. She could hear the exhaustion in his voice, the weight of men who were running on adrenaline and stubbornness alone. They didn't have the ammunition for another fight, and if the net closed... Her chest tightened. She had a choice. She could stay the ghost, guide them, cover them, never reveal herself. Or she could break the promise she had made years ago, the promise to never step back into the light of another unit, another war. But if she didn't, 12 men wouldn't see the sun rise. She swallowed, throat tight. Her finger pressed the transmit. "Charlie Actual, listen carefully." Blake's voice snapped back instantly. "Go ahead." Angela hesitated. Then the words came, steady but heavy. "You're in a net, 3 directions. 4th is the kill zone. You walk into it blind, you don't walk out." Silence. Then, options. Angela exhaled slowly. "There's one, but it means exposing my position." She hadn't meant to say it. She had guarded her anonymity like her last shield, but the words were out now. Irrevocable. Blake didn't hesitate. "If that's what it takes, do it." Angela's heart hammered. She knew what this meant. Once she stepped out of the shadows, there was no going back. She would no longer be a phantom in the mountains. She would be flesh, blood, and a target. She adjusted her scope again, shifting higher onto a narrow ledge that gave her a commanding view of the southern approach. And then, for the first time in years, she broke her silence fully. "Charlie Team, this is Ghost 6. My name is Angela Foster, former Army sniper, 75th Ranger Regiment. I'm not here on orders, I'm not sanctioned, but if you want to live, you'll follow me." The comms went silent. She could imagine the looks passing between the men, the sharp questions forming on their lips, a woman's voice, a name, a ghost with blood and bone. Blake's reply came last, and it was steady, firm. "Copy that, Ghost 6, you've got point." Angela's lungs burned as she repositioned, firing 2 quick rounds into the west ridge, dropping the lead scouts before they could adjust. Then she shifted, shots cracking into the north, cutting a gap just wide enough for the SEALs to slip through. "Move now," she ordered. And they did, without hesitation. The valley exploded again. Gunfire rolled like thunder across the stone, tracer fire streaking through the dark. The enemy had been waiting, patient until the last second, and now they pressed the assault from every side. Angela fired until her shoulder ached. Her cheek pressed so hard into the stock she could feel bruises forming. Every round was placed with cold precision, thinning the tide, forcing hesitation where momentum should have carried them. Below, the SEALs scrambled across broken terrain, returning fire with what little ammunition they had left. Shouts echoed, barked commands, the raw edge of survival written in every movement. Angela tracked them relentlessly, her scope never leaving their path. She was no longer just a ghost. She was their overwatch, their shield. And for the first time in years, she felt the dangerous burn of belonging again. But belonging had teeth. Through her scope, she caught sudden movement on the eastern ridge, a squad with heavier weapons, RPGs slung over shoulders. If they fired into the SEALs' retreat, the fight would end in seconds. Her pulse spiked. She shifted quickly, breath held, squeezed. One gunner down, then another. But there were too many, too fast. She fired again, dropped a third. The last one raised his launcher. Angela whispered, almost a prayer, "Not tonight." Her round struck home. The RPG clattered, useless to the rocks. She exhaled hard, too close. Blake's voice cut through the net, harsh and raw. "You just saved us again, Ghost 6. Angela didn't reply, because part of her didn't want the gratitude. Gratitude meant acknowledgement, and acknowledgement meant she wasn't just a ghost anymore. The fight stretched on. Minutes became an eternity of gunfire, shadows, and desperate movement. But slowly, painfully, the SEALs broke through. The net bent, then tore. Angela covered them until the last man slipped past the southern ridge. Then, finally, she pulled back, chest heaving, rifle barrel hot against her hand. She leaned against the rock, sweat cooling against her skin in the mountain wind. For a long moment, she let herself breathe. She had revealed herself. She had broken the vow. She was in it again. Her calms hissed, softer this time. Blake's voice was tired but steadier than she expected. "Angela, I don't know what you're running from, I don't care. But tonight you're part of this team, and I'll fight anyone who says otherwise." Her eyes stung. She blinked hard, looking away from the horizon. She wanted to tell him not to say that she wasn't part of anything anymore, that ghosts didn't belong to teams. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, she whispered into the comms, so soft she wasn't sure they'd hear it. "Copy." The night closed in again. The SEALs moved further south. Angela stayed in the shadows above them, her rifle steady, her heart unsteady. Because now she wasn't just fighting the enemy, she was fighting herself. And the war inside her might be the deadliest one yet. What remains when the fighting stops, when the echoes fade, and silence is all that's left? The mountains held their breath as dawn came again, pale and merciless. The SEALs had pushed through the night, exhausted and bleeding but alive. Angela trailed them from the ridges, her rifle still warm, her body screaming with fatigue. Every step was harder now. Every breath a reminder that she had given more of herself than she had promised she ever would again. They reached another valley floor just as the sun broke over the peaks. The light revealed everything: the torn uniforms, the blood-soaked bandages, the gaunt faces of men who had fought too long with too little. They collapsed into the shade of scattered pines, weapons still in hand, eyes darting to every sound. Survival kept them upright, but barely. Angela lay prone above them on a jagged outcropping, her scope sweeping wide. The enemy hadn't pressed through the night. Not yet. She knew what that meant. They weren't finished. They were waiting, measuring. The net hadn't broken, it had only shifted. Her comms hissed softly, Blake's voice raw quiet. "Ghost 6, you still with us?" She pressed the transmit. "Always." A pause. She imagined him sitting there, back against stone, helmet pushed back, sweat streaking through grime. "Angela," he said finally, voice softer than she'd heard it before. "Why are you really here?" The question she had avoided all night cut straight through her chest. She could have lied again. Could have told him she was passing through, stumbled into the fight, chose to help. But the lie stuck in her throat. Instead, she whispered, "Because I couldn't let it happen again." Again. Her eyes stung. She blinked hard, focusing on the scope on the horizon, anywhere but the memories clawing their way to the surface. "My brother, my husband, they didn't come home. I promised myself I'd never stand in the fight again. But when I heard your radio," she trailed off, the words breaking. Silence stretched on the net. Then Blake's voice came back, low, steady. "Then maybe that's why you were here, because we needed you." Angela closed her eyes. Needed. It was a dangerous word. It was the word that had always pulled her back, even when she tried to walk away. The mountains shifted again. Through her scope she caught it, the glint of metal on the northern ridge. More movement, more firepower. This wasn't over. She pressed the transmit, her voice sharpening. "Charlie Actual, contact north, heavy, this is the push." The SEALs scrambled, gathering weapons, positioning what little ammunition they had left. Angela shifted higher, her rifle sighting the first squad spilling into the valley mouth. The final battle came fast. Gunfire tore through the morning, a storm of sound and fury. The SEALs fought from cover, disciplined, precise, but every round they fired brought them closer to empty. Angela's rifle cracked rhythmically, dropping enemies before they could flank, cutting gaps where none existed. But they kept coming. 30, 40, a wave of soldiers determined to erase every survivor. Angela's body screamed, but her focus narrowed to a pinpoint. Every shot mattered. Every second counted. She wasn't just Overwatch anymore. She was their lifeline. Her scope caught sudden movement, an enemy squad breaking wide, circling toward the SEAL's exposed rear. Too far for them to notice, too close for her to stop them all. Angela's heart hammered. She knew what this meant. If she stayed hidden, firing from cover, the SEALs would be overrun. If she revealed herself, if she drew fire, it might buy them the seconds they needed. Her brother's voice echoed in her head. "Promise me, Ange. If you ever walk away, walk all the way." She hadn't kept that promise, and now she knew she never would. Angela pressed the transmit. Her voice was calm, steady, final. "Charlie Actual, I'm coming down." Blake's reply was immediate, urgent. "Negative, stay up there, you're our only cover." But she was already moving, sliding down the scree slope, rifle slung, pistol drawn. Her boots hit the valley floor with a crunch of gravel. For the first time, the SEALs saw her, saw the ghost they had been hearing all night. A woman in worn fatigues, eyes hard, rifle steady. Not a myth. Flesh and blood. For a split second, their faces registered shock, then relief, because in that moment she wasn't a stranger, she was one of them. Angela moved into position beside Blake, raising her rifle, firing in controlled bursts. The SEALs tightened their formation, their exhaustion replaced by something else: hope. The enemy adjusted instantly. Muzzle flashes turned toward her, tracer rounds slicing the air. Stones shattered around her, dirt kicked up, bullets whining like hornets. She dropped low, fired, shifted, fired again. Every round she fired, she knew the cost. Every second she stood there, she was the target. And yet, for the first time in years, she didn't feel like a ghost. She felt alive. The fight stretched into eternity. The SEALs held the line. Angela covered the gaps, her body moving on instinct, her mind a storm of memory and clarity. The net was tightening, but not fast enough. Because in the distance, faint and growing, she heard it, the chop of rotor blades, reinforcements, air support, extraction. She pressed her transmit, voice breaking with exhaustion and relief. "Hold just a little longer." The enemy heard it too. Their assault grew desperate, reckless, a final push before the sky belonged to Americans again. Angela fired until her rifle clicked empty, then drew her pistol, each shot deliberate, personal, final. And then silence. The Blackhawks roared overhead, Apache screaming down with rockets that tore the enemy ranks apart. The valley lit with fire and thunder, and then, impossibly, it was over. Angela sank to her knees, chest heaving, pistol slipping from her grip. She felt a hand on her shoulder, rough, steady. Blake. His voice was quiet, filled with something she couldn't name. "You're no ghost," he said, "not to us." She wanted to answer, to tell him he was wrong, that she was still lost, still haunted, but the words caught in her throat. The SEALs were lifted out minutes later, their bodies battered but alive. Angela didn't board the bird. She stayed at the edge of the LZ, rifle slung, eyes on the ridges. Blake turned as he climbed aboard, meeting her gaze. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then he raised 2 fingers to his temple in a salute, not military sharp but personal, a promise. The rotors kicked up dust, the helicopters lifted, and Angela was alone again. She stood in the silence of Guardian Valley, the mountains echoing with ghosts only she could hear. Her hands shook, her chest ached. She didn't know if she had saved them or if they had saved her. The shell casing from her last shot lay at her feet, gleaming faintly in the dawn. She picked it up, turning it in her hand. A reminder, a burden, a truth. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It doesn't explain. It simply acts. Angela slid the casing into her pocket, shouldered her rifle, and disappeared into the mountains. A ghost once more, but not the same. Never the same.